we're just going to say, hey, welcome to the inside. We're so glad you're here. And then hopefully you'll say, I'm glad I'm here too.
When your ears get red hot, you start breathing like SpongeBob.
Testing.
1, 2, 3, test the mics.
What's wrong? Hey everyone, and welcome to The Inside, a podcast where we get into the extraordinary minds and experiences of everyday people. I'm Jay, and with me as always is Adam. Hey there, Adam.
Hey, what's up, Jay?
You don't sound too good, man.
Oh, yeah, it's just a cold.
Knock, knock.
What?
I'm telling you a joke, man.
Why?
Well, because they say, laughter is the best medicine. Come on, ready? Knock, knock.
No. Wait, why should I even listen to you? You're not an MD.
Come on, yeah. You know what? I know one, and she says laughter is the best medicine.
But Jay, bad medicine, that's what I need.
Oh, God. Please don't tell me this thing's going to be full of Bon Jovi references.
Hey, I mean,
I hate that Bon Jovi song, man.
What? No, it's good. Anyway, though, so this lady's an MD, and she says laughter is healing, kind of like Patch Adams. Does she also dress like a clown?
Come on, man. Yes, she says that, and her name is Dr. Dena Ross Jennings, okay? So they're like, no, she doesn't dress like a clown.
Well, she sounds legit.
She's legit. And you know what, Adam? On top of all that, if that wasn't enough.
What? What else does she do?
Yeah, she runs a music festival. She lives on a farm. And guess what?
What?
She makes traditional African gourd banjos.
Wow. Could I play like a Bon Jovi song on one of these?
No, that's forbidden in the banjo land. Okay?
Well, now you got me curious to see what she has to say about laughter and that being the best medicine, because I think that's what I need. So what if we take a quick break, hear word from our fake sponsor, and then we can bring her on?
Yeah, good medicine is what you need.
Exactly. Hey, Jay, what's going on, dude?
I'm kind of embarrassed to say that.
Jay, come on. It's just you and me here. No one else can hear it. Just the two of us. What's up, man?
I guess. Well, I've been suffering from a bout of toe jam.
Toe jam? Isn't that what Homer Simpson puts on his sandwiches?
No, you're thinking about that episode where he put some toe in the rag soup for flavor.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm more concerned that you know what that episode is that well. But seriously, I'm sorry to hear about the toe jam. I know how smelly and uncomfortable that can be when it accumulates between the old toes.
Yeah, it's a bit slimy in the old shoe.
Well, you know what, Jay? Your troubles are over because recently I learned about Dr. Drake's Toe Jam Drying Agent called Dr. Drake's Toe Jam Drying Agent, or DDT JDA for short.
Oh, really?
Uh-huh.
Wow, how does that work?
Oh, it's really easy, Jay. You just open the box and stick the affected toe, or toes, in the powder for 15 minutes while shaking the box continuously with a lot of vigor and making this sound. Now, when you pull the toe out, it should be completely covered in dust. And within 60 minutes, Jay, you should be back to normal, or your toe may fall off. Either way, say goodbye to toe jam, Jay.
Wow, bye-bye, toe jam. That's great.
Yeah, it is great. And if you want to get some DDT JDA for your own disgusting foot, just use the link on our Instagram and type in the promo code to get 15% off your first order. Order your toe jammer medicine today.
How do you spell that promo code, Adam?
God, do I have to do everything for you?
Yeah, you do.
Well, hey, Dr. Dena. Thanks for being here. Welcome to
Hey.
the inside.
Oh, thanks. It's great to be here to see you and Adam. It's wonderful.
Yeah, cool. So, you actually know some other folks, or at least one person who became famous because of this podcast, right? We're talking about Mo from our
Yeah.
other seasons. How do you know Maurice?
Well, who doesn't know Maurice? But Maurice
That's a better question.
he is just an absolute joy that I met years ago when I moved into Kent, Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't realize it at the time, but when I was a kid and I used to go to Kent, he was actually one of the ones running one of my favorite restaurants there. And
Oh.
so I learned later as an adult that he was actually part of that peaceful kingdom. But I got to meet Mo through some other friends, and I think some of the first things we met at were music events. And then from there, it just blossomed. You know, he tells one story, I tell another, and another. And next thing you know, we're just laughing and having a great time. And that's been going on for over 20 years now.
Yeah. He's somebody special to be with, and I feel like he's somebody you always want other people to get to know, you know.
Yeah.
So Peaceable Kingdom, I got to go there a long time ago when it was open. So have you ever had a pea pie?
I have had my share of pea pies.
Yeah.
I have. They are so good.
Yeah.
And yeah, from when he used to have the pea pie truck, he'd go to like different festivals and have one of those great pea pies. Yep.
Awesome. I miss those things.
Yeah, Dr. Dena, where exactly did you grow up?
Well, I grew up in Akron, Ohio, and on North Hill, which was like cut off from the rest of Akron. So we sort of became our own little community, and it was mostly a neighborhood of first generation Italians.
Oh.
And yeah, it was great. Food was wonderful. People were great. I had a wonderful childhood there.
Well, what was it like growing up during that time, kind of as an African American woman in a neighborhood that was largely, you said Italian?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Well, it's funny because there you were just either Italian or not.
Okay.
It didn't matter really what the not was, because the not meant either black or Irish, or there were some Polish people there, but mostly you were either Italian or not. So growing up and in Northeast Ohio, in Akron, as a Black American, it was fairly comfortable. Fairly comfortable. At that time, this was like the 60s, mid 60s. So everybody was being very conscientious about their advertisements and things. So they had, it was sort of like the start of that three under a tree that you hear about in advertising, where, you know, you've got a guy, a girl, another girl, and then there's one brown person, one white person, and then a white person who's blonde. You know, I mean, that just seems to be this little package.
Right.
And that happened a lot. That started up a lot in the 70s. So I can remember being in the library and seeing posters of, you know, white kid, brown kid, all happy getting books. And I always felt like the brown kid because in that neighborhood that I was in, that's pretty much what it felt like. I was that representative brown kid, but not tokenized, you know, just I was part of that team. You know, Sesame Street was big, so they're like brown Muppets. You know, all those things were happening at that time. So, yeah.
Cool.
That's interesting because, you know, you think about that time. I was a kid a little bit later, but I remember that stuff. And
yeah,
it like what happened? You know, it was something we reversed for a long time, and now I feel like we're trying to like come back around.
Yeah, something switched, and I don't know what it was. I remember going back for my 10th high school reunion, and the biggest question that we all had was, what in the world is wrong with the rest of these people? I mean, why aren't they getting along like we did?
Right.
You know, we got along pretty beautifully, I think, for being that mixed of a culture. You know, it didn't hurt that Akron was in its heyday at the time. You know, Akron's the rubber capital of the world. And so my dad was working for one of the big rubber companies. He was in a white collar job. My mom worked for a bank, so she was in a white collar job. You know, the Derby Downs, I don't know if you remember Derby Downs, that Akron was the headquarters for that. So kids were coming from all over the world in the soapbox derby cars that they made and taken up to the hill and let loose. and Wide World of Sports would be there. So, Akron was at its real heyday. Um, so it was not a difficult place to grow up.
Mm. Well, I'm glad you had that experience. So we're going to touch on this in a little bit later, but I just wanted to ask you briefly about some of the musical instruments you make, because it's of a cultural origin. And can you say a little bit about that?
I make primarily gourd instruments that have been represented all around the world, because the gourd, for those who don't know what a gourd is like, it's like a squash, but it has a very hard shell.
Mm-hmm.
You can't eat a gourd because it'll make you very sick, but people grow them to use as water containers, as storage containers, and some people all around the world decided to use them as hollow-bodied instruments, mostly stringed instruments. And so as a result, there's just this vein of all across cultures of this gourd instrument appearing in all these different cultures. And I got a real interest in that, primarily in our culture here in North America. The gourd instrument is the banjo that was made in the Appalachian Mountains by blacks as well as whites. The Foxfire books, I don't know if you've heard about those.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of archives the simple life in Appalachian, mostly Central and South. But they actually have plans in there for building a gourd banjo. And these are books from the 60s.
Yeah.
So I started making all these instruments that are represented in cultures around the world, African cultures, mostly West African. There's some East African cultures. India has their own gourd instrument. Then Ethiopia has a gourd instrument. Across Asia, it's pretty universal.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And the Foxfire place in North Georgia is only about an hour from here, and I remember they had a lot of camps for day camp things for kids. And when my kids were younger, they went there and learned how to make rope, and they milked a goat, and just did some of this other stuff that people used to do all the time. So I watched this year the Juneteenth video that you posted and you made about your, see if I get this right, your great grandfather, Samuel.
Yes, you got it.
All the right grades.
Yeah.
Samuel Dry, I think this is his name.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And in this video, I saw, I learned that in 1864 he escaped to freedom because the human traffickers continued to ignore the Emancipation Proclamation from the year before. And you said that he went, I think, 100 miles from the Cumberland Gap to Camp Nelson in Kentucky, which was like a massive supply station for the Union Army. And I think you said there was like 1,400 other African Americans there because the Union Army was offering freedom in exchange for service, right? And the the 123rd Regiment of the U.S. Colored Army. That's so amazing.
Yeah.
That whole story. I don't know, I don't know where to start, but can you tell us some about that, or I don't know that I summed it up right.
Yeah, you hit all the main parts. Thanks for watching that video, by the way.
Of course.
It's my fourth great grandfather on my mom's side, and they were enslaved in Kentucky in the Cumberland Gap area, and he and another gentleman from the same plantation ran at the same time. He's not a relative, but his name was also Dry because, of course, they took the name of their tractor.
Okay.
But yeah, so they arrived there and they were assigned to that 123rd Regiment. There were many other regiments, but he was assigned to that one.
Mm-hmm.
And their regiment primarily did, they were like staff for this huge supply station, which was actually like a small town. It had its own hospital. It had its own, it had its own farm, so they grew their own food. It was a great salt supply station for the region and water supply. So he didn't see combat. He was one of the people helping to keep those supplies going.
And so was just the other gentleman, the other dry person with him, or was he have like a wife and a family with him?
Just the other gentleman, and I don't know how much they stayed together afterwards. I was, he was not married at the time. At the end of the war, when my grandfather was released from his duties, he actually went back to Cumberland Gap, and that's where he started his family.
Okay.
So after freedom.
I remember you saying something interesting on the video, like of what happened to the wives and families that were there with the men at Camp Nelson.
Yeah.
Will you talk about that?
Yeah. This is a pretty devastating story. Kentucky was not a ceded state. So they weren't one of the ones saying, we don't want to be part of the U.S. anymore, so let us out. They were one of the border states. And as such, when blacks would escape from their captors, they were not captured and returned as contraband. Mm-hmm. So they were considered contraband as lost goods, because they weren't considered humans; they were considered goods. So as contraband, they would be captured and held, or they would be returned to their plantation. In Kentucky, that didn't happen. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the ceded states, when they the states that seceded, when someone ran away to a camp to join the Union Army, that family was considered contraband, and there were federal dollars to help support those who were contraband. In Kentucky, they weren't considered contraband, so there were no federal dollars to help those women and children who ran with the men. Mm. So these women and children who arrived at Camp Nelson, and there was a substantial number, they started to build little shanty towns all around the camp. They said, we're not going back.
Oh. Yeah.
We'll go back. We're not going back, and you won't let us stay here. You're not helping us stay here, because we're basically refugees of war. So we'll just build these little shanty towns. And they built these little shanty towns, and the U.S. government, the Union troops, finally said, we can't have this here. You guys need to go. They kicked them all out in the winter and burned the place to the ground.
Oh my gosh.
So a lot of the women, so a lot of the women and children escaped into the woods. Many died because it was winter. They didn't have provision. They didn't have any way to live. And luckily, the activists in the area of Lexington, Kentucky, which is where this camp is, they weren't standing for it. They said, you can't treat people this way. You have to make provision for these people. And there were newspaper articles and complaints and protests and things, until finally the union said, well, okay, we'll come up with some money to help these women and children. And they built places for them to come back to.
Wow, that's so progressive. Mm-hmm.
It's pretty amazing that it took that, but that's the importance of activism.
Exactly.
The least little bit you can do is speak up, because you never know where it'll go.
Oh, what a good example.
Well, something else that's pretty amazing is that you've always been in some sort of musical setting. Like early on in your life, you sang in a choir, and then after that, you had an apprenticeship with a banjo maker. And since then, you've gone on to build a lot of banjos in like the African style you mentioned earlier.
And could you just tell us a little bit more about how you kind of put your own flair on those?
Well, you're right. I've been singing since I was a little kid. You know, we used to sing in church, and there were three of us. My oldest sister Vivian, she used to, when we were in the car waiting for something, she'd have us sing a note. She'd say, all right, you sing this note, you sing that note, I sing. And it was actually a chord, and we'd hear these harmonies. So we started singing, and we played the circuit of singing on the radio for churches and things. So my love of music has always been there, and the Appalachian background. I always wondered why our music didn't sound like Mahalia Jackson. In those days, it sounded more like Roy Clark and Hee Haw, and I couldn't figure that out. But it's because of our Appalachian culture. So when I got my interest in the banjo, I had gone to one of the largest stringed instrument companies in North America and probably the world, Elderly in Lansing, Michigan. And there was a banjo on the wall that was really, really cool. And I looked at the name of the sculptor, the luthier who made it. And I looked him up online, and he was doing workshops. So I went up and did an apprenticeship with him. So long story short, he really had it was in Canada. He really had a heart for the origins of the banjo, the African origins of the banjo. And because of that, his sculpting, his styling had a lot to do with that early African imagery of the banjo. And that's sort of where, of course, he's teaching me, so that became my interest as well. And then I took it kind of a next level. I only build custom banjos. So when people talk with me, I ask them, what are things important to you? And we try to incorporate that into the banjo and get that styling when we sculpt the neck.
Interesting. I think I read that or saw somewhere that when you went to the workshop, you ended up being the only participant or something.
Yeah, I did. This was crazy. Jeff Menzies is the name of my mentor, and he's incredible. I mean, he and I still keep in touch today. And his family was there. He had two little kids and his wife. And they said, well, everybody's canceled this workshop. What should we do with this woman who wants to come up? And they said, I don't know. Well, let's see if we can find out more about her. They looked at my Facebook page, and for some reason I had been cooking for some people. So I had a lot of pictures of food that I had prepared and they said, look, she can cook. Go ahead and let her come to this workshop. Maybe we can get some meals out of it. So they did. They told me that was the deciding factor to go ahead and leave the workshop open. And nonetheless, I got a one-on-one apprenticeship with one of the premier builders in the country. And in North America, and I got to spend a long time with him. He was also fulfilling a large order, so he let me help on this large order that he was doing. So I got even more skill. And while I was there, I said, this is awesome. I need to just move here and apprentice with you. I said, if I could find a place to stay, I would do that tomorrow. And sure enough, the next day, the apartment across the street from their house went up for rent.
No way.
And so he said, are you going to look at it? And I said, absolutely. So I went and looked at it and signed the lease and moved up there for 4 years. It was great.
And you heard it here first, people. You can barter home cooking for any kind of skills you want to get.
You can.
Well, yeah. Dr. Dena, what's the if you can, you may not be able to do this, but kind of what's the price range? There must be a range where if someone gets a custom banjo made.
Yeah, to get a custom gourd banjo that is not fretted, doesn't have the frets on it, that starts at about $800. And then if you want even more flair on it, or if you want frets on it, depending on what kind of peg you want on it, handmade or stock, the size of the gourd, because I grow my own gourds now, all of those things sort of inch up in price.
Mm-hmm.
So to get like a really awesomely crafted, sculpted gourd banjo, the price is going to range anywhere from 800 to like 1500.
Wow.
But I've had some sell at auction for a lot more. So.
I think that's less than I thought you were going to say. So that's pretty awesome, man.
I try to make it affordable.
Yeah. Well, moving a little later into your young adult life and college, you switched from wanting to be a park ranger, I guess, as a biology major, to getting a medical degree.
Big shift.
Big shift. I'm still feeling that.
Are you ever sorry that you made that change, or you're good with it?
No.
Yeah.
No. I've made my peace with that decision. I decided in 4th grade to be a park ranger, and I was one of those that I knew that's what I wanted to do. I knew what I wanted to study. I had set my sights on that. I worked with the Youth Conservation Corps to build my skill as a park ranger. And about the end of my sophomore year, politics in Washington changed so that everything I had my sights on lost its funding, its federal funding. And I had to make a decision. At that time, of course, you're thinking, what can I change to without losing a year? And the only thing I could switch to was poetry, creative writing, or pre-med. And yeah, if you knew my dad, I didn't even bother to have that conversation. I just said, yeah, guess what? I'm going to be a doctor. So, but things all work out. I kept my interest in the outdoors, and now I live on a 100+ acre farm.
Yeah,
where I've built trails, and we've got beaver dams and all kinds. So I'm living on a park bigger than I ever worked in.
You're the ranger of your own park.
Yeah. So it all works out.
What was it like being a female getting a medical degree, and maybe even more like African American female? Did that feel different, or did you just feel like you're right in there with your other classmates?
It was tough, and this is around the time when that shift was happening in the country, from the 3 under the tree and the cute little thing to the tokenization of blacks in white spaces in America.
Was this in the 80s?
Yeah, this was like 86 to early 90s.
Okay.
So things started shifting quite a bit. I didn't notice a lot in undergrad, because in undergrad there were not many women, and there certainly were no blacks. I was like the only black person in the biology department for, professors or otherwise. You just didn't see it, and just kept your nose down, didn't think about it. I was too busy trying to get into medical school.
Yeah.
In medical school, in a class of 100, there were only 4 of us, 4 black students.
Wow.
And we faced some pretty crazy stuff, and not from the students as much as systemically. Just constantly questioning, were we supposed to be there? How did you get in? Are you, is this part of some program? It's like, no, I worked hard and got in just like everybody else. In fact, you set the criteria, you know how I got in here. But it turned into a very unpleasant situation. But like I said, it wasn't the professors, it wasn't the students, it was the just systemically, the culture itself was not hip.
Did you find an ally during that time? Or was just everywhere you went, it was hard?
Everybody was just trying to get out. We were all trying to get our grades and get out. So there wasn't a lot of allyship to make. You were just too busy. You were either in lab or had your nose in a book somewhere. Basically, you're studying, working really hard while you're swatting off administrations that were trying to say. I went to a meeting. There was a meeting of, I think for campus wide. It wasn't just for medical students. Campus wide, they had like a Black student union, and they had a meeting one night. It's free people, so I went. And I'm sitting there, and the administrator stood up and said, "Do you realize that for each and every one of you, we get X number of dollars for Black students?" And I remember my young activist self standing up and saying, "I will not stand here and be monetized like you're a trafficker. What are you doing?" And, myself and about 3 or 4 others walked out and said that we were offended by that correlation that they were making. And they didn't get it. They just didn't understand that was a really inappropriate thing to say. So you just went back to your study room and started studying some more. That's all you really could do.
Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and kind of currently moving into more modern days, you have many hats. And if I could wear just one of them one day, I would be grateful. You're a doctor of, is it osteopathy?
Yeah.
So a DO, for short. And you use that to help folks with kind of addiction, and that your nonprofit, is it pronounced Imani Works?
Yes.
Okay. Could you tell us a little bit more about what that is?
Osteopathic physician. If you ever have trouble saying osteopathy, it goes hippity hoppity osteopathy. That helps. That helps you get it out. An osteopathic physician is the physician that stands between the gap of like the allopathic physician, an MD, and a chiropractor. And so we sort of stand in that gap. We learn everything that an allopathic doctor learns, so we become pediatric neurosurgeons just like the rest. But in addition to that, we get 300 hours of hands-on manual medicine that we learn to use just like the chiropractors do. So, and one day I'll tell you this really cool story about how that all got started. It was started by a guy who was an activist, and just, of course, that was right up my alley.
Yeah.
So that's what that's about. And then when I finished the whirlwind of medicine, I was still dealing with the idea that I was not going to be a park ranger. And so I took a month off and I just traveled around the Maritime provinces of Canada and the Northeast and just thought for a long time, and decided that I needed to make art as much a part of my practice as everything I had just learned. And in doing that, I looked at some peace organizations I had been involved in and the artwork that I was doing, and I was looking at a list of the human rights. There are 30 of them. It's amazing. There's 30 human rights. And one of them is your right to culture, and another is your right to play. So I thought, I could do that. So I set up Imani Works as a human rights advocacy nonprofit. And I've always had an art gallery as my waiting room. And we always had workshops and things that people could come in and do to either learn more about human rights, advocacy, and also about art. So that's kind of where all that, so the medical office and Imani Works all got started at the same time.
Are they in the same place?
Yeah, the Imani Works has always been headquartered with the medical office. And now that I'm moving into retirement, I've folded the medical office into Imani Works. It is now one of the programs of the human rights nonprofit.
Okay. Well, one thing you said is that you believe that medicine and music are both forms of healing. Can you explain what you meant by that?
Yeah. A crying baby hears a lullaby. Hush, little baby, don't you cry. Right? And that soothes that child to sleep. people who are on hospice units have harp music, harp players come in and play. Or you think of all the different ways that we use music to soothe ourselves when we don't feel well, and to touch that place that maybe a pill or a syrup or a surgery can't touch. So why not combine the two? Why not do the traditional, conventional medicine and the music? And there's already some evidence that sound waves themselves actually are healing to our bodies, resonance. So my thought is, why not combine all of that?
And I think you're on to a national model here. Can you imagine,
nice.
Adam? Can you imagine going to the doctor, Adam, and there's like beautiful art up and music playing, and it's just
I was
like,
thinking more like I go in with it, like I go in there and there's like some White Snake playing.
God, that's not.
Why not? Why not?
Thanks, Dr. Dena. But someone supportive.
Yeah.
Well, as you were talking, I was thinking about like with like music being healing and stuff, and Adam's going to roll his eyes, but like Johnny Cash and BB King and those guys like knew that, right? Like they'd go into prisons and play and stuff to like the most broken people and bring them something that was healing in a way. And I even remember BB King talking when he was in San Quentin playing and saying, to the crowd, like blues is something that people think is supposed to make you sad. And he said, no, it's the opposite. It's, something that's supposed to make you get up and dance and forget your worries.
Yeah. Or just to sing that out so you don't have that you're carrying around.
So you work out of your studio now. It's on your farm, right? Mm-hmm. And I guess you and your husband, you were saying you farm together. I think I read your husband's an organic farmer, and that's where you build your banjos, your gourd banjos. But I want to hear about, you have a music festival there too, right? Called the Appalachian On Time Music Gathering.
So the thing.
Yeah.
we call it the thing for sure.
Okay. So you did that in 2018 and
that's our first year.
Okay. I guess you were interrupted by COVID or?
Oh no, we went online for it.
Oh, cool.
Good for y'all.
Yeah.
So
2020 was online.
Okay.
We had an actual 2019, a virtual 2020, and now we're again going to do the 2021 is going to be actual, not virtual.
Okay, so let me back up a minute. That's specifically celebrating like Black American roots music, right?
Yes.
Tell us more about that.
Oh, wow. The festival starts with a retreat for Black string band musicians, dancers, and our allies. And so you're invited to our farm and you get to camp out. My husband and I feed you and care for you and just let you be yourselves for 3 or 4 days. And then on Saturday night, we have a large concert of all those musicians who've just been resting and relaxing. Most of them are coming in off the road after playing, after creating, being in the studio all summer. They come to our place and rest. And then we do a concert that night for the public. There's a camp out for the public and a big jam after the concert. And then in the morning, we all wake up and do a gospel sing together, and then we go home.
Is it invitation only, or can me and Jay expect to travel up there?
You would totally be welcome to come to the concert and to the gospel, the concert, the jam, and the gospel sing. We keep the retreat part as an invitation because those guys need rest.
Okay,
And
understandable.
what my husband and I were hoping to do is to provide them with some rest. And here's my husband. So we're hoping to provide rest for those musicians. Yeah.
Well, kind of when you consider all that's going on in the world today, where do you find hope, or what gives you hope?
Days that are where the glass is half full and I'm feeling hopeful, those are days when I realize that we are all okay. We're all good people. Yeah, even that one. Because most of the time we are trying to explain to ourselves the darkness we see in ourselves through what we see in other people. We have to recognize it in ourselves first before we can see it in somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And that we're really all more the same than we are different. And those who are just tough cookies out there who are difficult to understand or seem the darkest, they're really not that much unlike ourselves. And that with a little bit of compassion and a little bit of understanding, I think you're able to shine some light in their lives so that dark.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's my hope, is that we're all the same. We just have to show compassion.
I like that. That reminds. I think the one thread we've had when we talked to Mo is, he talks a lot about loving other people and loving yourself. And how you have to love yourself first before you can get out there and love on other people.
Yeah. I mean, if I can't accept in myself that sometimes I'm angry, then how am I going to accept that from you? But if I realize, yeah, sometimes I do get angry, and maybe I understand a little bit more why you're so angry. Maybe the object of our anger isn't the same, but the feeling of it, when your ears get red hot, you start breathing like SpongeBob, then yeah, you realize that wow, we're really not that different. Even that one, even the one that you think, well, except that guy, even that guy.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Jennings, we've got a thing we like to call a speed round here. So what's going to happen is we're going to ask you, we're going to ask you some this or that questions, and you're just going to answer whichever one you like better as quickly as you can. Okay?
I'll do my best.
Awesome. I'm sure you will.
There's no wrong answer. Unless the question's Adam or Jay, and you pick Adam.
Ooh.
Okay. Notes taken.
Banjo or guitar?
Banjo.
Country jam or gospel sing?
Ooh. Country jam or gospel sing?
It's a speed round.
Gospel jam.
Ooh, okay.
I like
that. Yeah. Alrighty. Ultimate on the line. Here we go. Park ranger or DO?
DO by day, park ranger by night.
Okay, yeah.
Can I do that?
Yeah.
She's having everything. A night or a night out?
Night out.
Alrighty. Train travel or air travel?
Train.
Okay.
Organic gourd or chocolate chip cookie?
Organic gourd.
Ooh. Well, Dr. Dena, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It was a blast to have you on.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a great time, Jay and Adam. I really love talking with you.
Well, thanks so much.
We'll catch you later, all right?
All right, take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.
What a great interview, man. Talk about a really special person. Hey, let's shake on it right now, okay? Next year, you and I, we're going to the Thang Festival.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's do that, man. I can't wait.
Me neither. And, one thing that really grabbed my attention was just all the skills. She has so many skills for different things. It's especially that banjo making, man. I think skills like that, they're like a rare breed this day and age. You kind of got to either know someone or your parents or something, like it gets passed down. It's not something you can be like, oh, I'm going to the community college to learn about African gourd banjo making.
Yeah.
I would like, if I could just be a fly on the wall and go in and watch her make one of those and see more about how like the process behind it, I think that'd be really cool just to see how it got made.
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe she could go on the show how it's made. What do you think about that?
Or you could be like a spider on the wall too.
Oh yeah,
if
that's true.
If you don't want to be a fly.
Yeah,
on the
thanks
wall.
for looking out for me, man. What about you? What'd you think?
I did love this interview, Adam, and it's really hard for me to pick out some favorite parts, but I know you're gonna want me to.
Yeah, you better. I need a favorite part
I will.
right now.
Well, the story about her, about Samuel Dry, her great grandfather, and the role of activism, like way back then, was amazing to me because you don't hear much about that. And then I love like how her vision is more about like the holistic person, like the holistic approach rather than just like treating symptomatic type of things. And then of course, like you mentioned, you know, the journey and the banjo making and the apprenticeship that she did and all that to kind of become now like this like specialty banjo maker. And of course, developing the Appalachian on-time music gathering that we're going to go to next year.
Oh yeah, can't wait! Woo! Well, you think that about wraps it up for today, man? Alrighty, and that was The Inside. Again, Dr. Dena Ross Jennings' website is www.imaniworks.org. That is www.imaniworks.org. Special thanks to our guest, Dr. Dena Ross Jennings, and our producer, Dave. The show is written, recorded, edited, and co-produced by Jay and myself. Our title music, Crossroads, is written by Rock Sounds, and we'll have a link in the show description for that for you guys. Our title music was recorded by Keith Richards. And we'll have a few more episodes coming soon for this farewell season, so make sure to listen to us wherever you get your podcasts. As always, follow us on Instagram at The Inside Podcasters, or feel free to shoot us an email at theinsidepodcasters@gmail.com. Hey, this is me at the computer again.
No, this is me at the computer.
No, it's not, eh?
It is. It's me at the computer.
I hope I didn't like spin around too much.
No. Trust me.
Especially compared to Maurice.
That guy can spin.
He can spin, yeah. I'm sitting there, and the administrator stood up and said, do you realize that for each and every one of you, we get X number of dollars for black students? And I remember my young activist self standing up and saying, I will not stand here and be monetized like you're a trafficker.